Hey, what is going on, guys? This is the SS Ultimate Goku, back with another video. And today I am going to be talking about the Fairly Odd Parents. I'm gonna try to talk about some of the classics out there that I don't really talk about as much. A lot of cartoons that I don't really talk about as much, because let's face it, I've pretty much talked about almost every uh, anime out there that am interested in, as well as other shows that I'm interested in. So I want to talk about some other shows that I don't really talk about that I liked. And one of the shows that I really liked as a kid was The Fairly Odd Parents. Um, and The Fairly Odd Parents, in my opinion, would be a show that would be right up there with SpongeBob in terms of Nickelodeon shows, because I mean the show literally ran for 20 years and pretty much outlasted um it pretty much outlasted uh almost every show that I watched as a kid. It pretty much outlasted them all. And was, toe to toe with SpongeBob, and then sometimes even had more ratings than SpongeBob at times for some episodes. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end, and unfortunately, with the Fairly Odd Parents, um, it suffered the syndrome that Pokemon has lasted, because pretty much all the kid characters are 10 years old, just like Ash Ketchum and Pokemon and all this stuff. It pretty much had the syndrome of, we're just going to keep repeating the formula over and over again, and it eventually gets to the point where it just gets like, here we go again, you know. And that's pretty much what happened to Fairly Odd Parents. Is once you get to a certain point in a show, you pretty much, this is pretty much your peak, and there's pretty much all you can do at that point. And Fairly Odd Parents, unfortunately, suffered through that. Despite it still getting a decent amount of fan base. I mean, whether people want to admit it or not, season 9, the season before the season 10, which we'll get to, was still putting on a decent amount of ratings for a modern rating system. It was still around average of 3 million. Some episodes were less than 3 million, but still, just under it with 2.93. So Fairly Odd Parents was still having a respectable fan base, even all the way up to as far as season 9, which I believe season 9 was around in 2015, 2016-ish years. If I'm not mistaken. I could have the years wrong, but you get the point. So, season 10, which was the final season, was really awkward, to say the least. It introduced a new character, which we'll get to right now, named Chloe. Now, as we all know, Chloe is not exactly a character that many people like, for obvious reasons, and a lot of people will argue that this character is pretty much what killed Fairly Odd Parents. And considering the fact that season 10 was pretty much terrible, in terms of ratings, in terms of critical reception, in terms of everybody that watched it and sat through it, pretty much agreed that Chloe, as well as the fairy dog and all this other stuff that they introduced in the final season that really didn't need to be there, is pretty much what did Fairly Odd Parents in. Now, I'm not going to be as harsh to Chloe as a lot of the fan base has, because I don't think the idea of Chloe was a bad idea. It wasn't a terrible idea, but at the same time, I don't think it was a good idea. And let me explain that. So Chloe as a character wasn't bad per se, but the idea of her was bad. Because at this stage in the show, she was not needed. If she had been introduced years ago, I don't think the fan base would have been as much harsh to the character as she was. Unfortunately for Chloe, the character was introduced so late into the series that the character didn't make sense to being there. And the whole plot points on why she was there didn't make sense. Or not really the plot points of why she had to share her Fairly Odd or Timmy Turner had to share basically his Fairly Odd Parents with Chloe because according to Jordan Monstrangle, quote unquote, they were there was a shortage in fairies, mythical fairies. Okay, there's a shortage of mythical fairies in fairy world. Do you see the problem here? Okay, so Chloe, the idea of Chloe and the idea of Timmy Turner having to share his fairies with Chloe, just it doesn't make sense at all. And from a plot point standpoint, from every pretty much standpoint you can get at, pretty much doesn't work. It just doesn't add up. And really, in my opinion, it takes away the spotlight. Like when I seen some of these episodes for Chloe and really diving deep into the final season, the thing with Chloe that's really weird is that it felt like the Fairly Odd Parents as a show was more about her than Timmy Turner. Like Timmy Turner was there, but it felt like he wasn't like the main attraction anymore. It was like, oh, we got this new character, Chloe. We have to share my Fairly Odd Parents with her, but I have to, she's more important than me. But I just gotta be here because, obviously I'm the main character. That's what it felt like in the final season. Okay? It felt like they were trying to, yeah, Timmy's still here, but, Chloe is the the attraction now. It felt like they were trying to force Chloe as like something that she wasn't. And that's the problem. And that probably is why the ratings really dipped. Like, I mean dipped. The average ratings for the final seasons were 0.22. 0.22. Now, keep in mind, as I said earlier in this video, the average ratings that were in season 9, okay, were 3 million, okay? 3.00, okay? Sometimes it would be a little down. It would be at like maybe a 2.93, but that's still far better than a 0.22. The 0.22 is horseshit, okay? Okay, that's just crap, okay? Okay, that's pitiful, okay? So you can understand why the show was canceled, okay, after this. Now, I will put a link in the description from Butch Hartman's point of view on Chloe, on why she was introduced. He gets into detail on what Nickelodeon was looking for. This was a Nickelodeon decision for Chloe to be introduced. So you guys can check that out and make your own assumption for yourself. But basically, what kind of Butch Hartman had said about Chloe was that the network basically was like, we want to have a new season of Fairly Odd Parents, but we want you to introduce a female character. So they were really trying to force. So the network, from what I got from Butch Hartman's story, which is very believable, is that they wanted to force on a female character for the series. But obviously they couldn't get rid of Timmy Turner because Timmy Turner is the main character. So they basically introduced Chloe to kind of basically share the spotlight with Timmy, but make it more forced on her, as a female character. Which I don't have a problem with a female character, but her being the main character of a show that revolves around Timmy Turner absolutely does not make sense. Like I said, this was the biggest problem. Now, one of the ways that Chloe as a character, well, not even Chloe, but a female character could have worked without screwing things up like they did with Chloe, was introduce a legacy character. So instead of creating Chloe, what should have happened is they should have brought back Trixie. That's right, I said it, Trixie. Now keep in mind, Trixie Tang is someone who obviously is a popular character. She's the most popular character in Timmy Turner's school. Timmy Turner has a crush on her, but she hadn't been around for a good 3 seasons. So the last season that Trixie Tang was involved in was season 7, and she was only in a few episodes. Season 8, she wasn't in there, though there was a cameo of Crockett. Basically, dressing up as her. But that was about it. Season 9, she wasn't there. And then, of course, the final season, she wasn't in there as well. This would have been a perfect way to introduce Trixie back into the show. And also, she's a popular female character. So, while the plot of her somehow getting Fairly Odd Parents probably wouldn't have made sense, at least I think the audience would have been more accepting of her, because she was a character from the past. She was a character that was more noticeable. She was a character that more people could identify with. So even though the whole concept of, fairy shortage, it would have made sense. You could have, she could have had her come back. It had been 3 seasons, obviously, since she had been around. But you could have had her you could have had her come back. They could have come up with the argument that she was miserable because even though she was a popular character, she was crazy. And, she has a crazy side because when Timmy, made the wish that she and her were the only two, he and her were the only two left on the world, she got crazy for him and whatnot, to the point where it was psychotic. So there would have been obvious ways for Trixie Tang to have come back and had been the character that shared with the Fairly Odd Parents, shared the Fairly Odd Parents together. And I think it would have been much more interesting, since obviously Timmy as a character had a crush on her. It would have been a more interesting, and it would, I think, help the ratings better, because again, Chloe was a new character that no one knew about, no one cared about. It was a character, like I said, that just didn't work because she was a new character that no one cared about. And they were forcing more on her than Timmy Turner. That's another problem. Like I said, they were forcing on her. Like even some of the episodes, the majority of the episode titles were called Chloe, not Timmy, in it. And that was another problem. Is they were forcing on Chloe. They were forcing more on Chloe than the main character. The main character really wasn't even the main character in the final season. He was just kind of there just to be there because obviously you can't get rid of Timmy Turner. It was one of those situations where it was like we want the female to be the main character, but you have to keep Timmy Turner obviously in there because he's been there for so long and it's his show. But it felt like he was like an afterthought. He was just kind of there to follow around Chloe more than Chloe following around Timmy. Which doesn't make sense since the show is supposed to be about him. I mean, she was even in the theme song too. They reworked the theme song for her too, which even tells you more about it. So, like I said, Trixie would have been Trixie would have been the person to have used. Another person that could have been the character instead of Chloe is Veronica. Veronica is someone else that could have been the character if you don't want to use Trixie, because Veronica was more miserable than Trixie because she was a character that was someone who wanted to be Trixie. She literally was jealous of Trixie. I mean, they were best friends, but she was jealous of her, as well as she secretly had a crush on Timmy Turner, which it was even more interesting than itself and ironic because she had a crush on him. Timmy had a crush on Trixie. So that just tells you, like, there's more things you can do with that, because again, these characters are older characters. They are characters that are female characters that the fan base likes, and while they probably would have screwed things up with their characters for season 10, at least it would have been more tolerable for the fans to have been like, okay, well, we like this character, so we're gonna watch it, rather than introduce a completely strange new character that no one knows. Like, the older fans that grew up with the show aren't gonna understand Chloe, and then the newer fans that were watching the Fairly Oddparents, like the younger audience, which is what the demographic is supposed to be for, okay, they aren't gonna know who Chloe is. Like, they're not like, wait, I thought Fairly Oddparents is supposed to be about Timmy Turner. They're going to be kind of confused by this new character, especially if they're watching the older episodes too, because obviously Nickelodeon rerunned a lot of the classic episodes for the younger kids that weren't alive when the Fairly Oddparents originally aired. So the newer episodes, then, they're not going to understand why this character exists. And then the older audience that had been watching it for years on end, that are now adults that are watching this, aren't going to be understanding of what they're watching because they don't know who this character is. Chloe had a completely identity crisis because we had no idea what this character was or why this character was here. She was literally there just because the network wanted her to be there. That's literally the only reason why she existed. And when that happens, that's pretty much the sign of the show coming to an end. And unfortunately, because of this, the Fairly Oddparents ended. Butch Hartman ended up leaving Nickelodeon. I don't know if Butch would have still left Nickelodeon had the show been successful. Like, if the show had been successful and they wanted a new season, I wonder if he would have left still, but still done the show for Nickelodeon, or what would have happened there. But obviously, the writing was on the wall, and Chloe single-handedly was the reason why this show was canceled. You can't say it was anything else, because the previous season, again, the average ratings were at 3 million, which that's still pretty good. That's Monday Night Raw numbers right now, okay? Actually, Raw's a little less than that because of how bad the wrestling has been doing in the last year. But still, the fact that they were still getting average numbers like that was still very, very promising. From to going to average numbers like that, which is still very good in this day and age of modern day ratings, to go all the way down to a 0.22 just tells you that no one was interested in a new character. When you have a long-running show like The Fairly Odd Parents, and you introduce a character like Chloe, that has no development, has no sense of being there, no reason really to be in there, and you come up with a lame excuse to why she has to share the fairies with Timmy Turner, it doesn't make sense. Like I said, I feel like if they had tried this formula with the character that had been already established, I think it would have worked. And no, I would not have used Tootie because I don't like Tootie. As you all know, I would have used either Trixie or Veronica to be Chloe. Because, well, personally, I would have used Trixie because I like Trixie. Trixie was a character who I actually shipped with Timmy Turner when I was a kid. So I would have preferred that dynamic for the final season over Chloe. But also, I think Veronica could have done good as well as someone who could have shared that whole thing with Fairly Odd Parents. Again, also these characters, like I said, they're all, despite their height and stuff like that, they were the same age as Timmy Turner, so it's not even really a big deal. They had the same Ash. They had Ash Ketchum. They had Ash Ketchum syndrome because they literally were still 10 years old. Okay, they were still 10 years old. They had the fairly plot line. Oh yeah, I wished myself to still be 10 years old. Type deal. That's basically what it was. That's what it was all along, ladies and gentlemen. And no, we do not count the live action movie. We don't count that thing. We don't talk about it. Sorry, Drake. That just, nah. They tried. Well, I also don't like that they got what was it? They did Tootie. The Tootie was an adult. I didn't like. I was not a fan of that shit. No, as a kid, no. I like the kid getting the popular girl. Especially since she didn't originally like and then she did like whatnot. I always prefer that type of dynamic ship, as you guys always know. Being a pokey shipper with Ash and Misty. I kind of prefer that type of stuff. So yeah, as a kid, I did prefer Trixie Tang. Which, by the way, Butch Hartman had even revealed that Trixie, the name Trixie, for Trixie Tang, actually came from Speed Racer, the character named Trixie in Speed Racer. He had talked about this. I just thought that was actually kind of interesting, that was the concept. But yeah, so this is my thoughts on retrospect of Fairly Odd Parents, the final season. Now, will the Fairly Odd Parents come back? I know they are supposed to be doing some type of live action thing. Hopefully it's not like the movie that they did. Personally, if the Fairly Odd Parents were ever to come back, I would much prefer it to be a continuation of the cartoon, because I think the cartoon is where it's at. I just don't think Fairly Odd Parents really works in live action, and I think we've shown that. It's not really that good in live action, the way the formula works. Um, but they do come back. I hope they bring back the legacy characters because, again, Trixie Tang had been out for 3 seasons. Um, the last 3 seasons she was not there, which, according to the voice acting bio for the person who voiced the character, she hadn't voiced the character since 2009, and that just seems really, really like holy crap, a long time for a popular character like that to not be shown is pretty interesting to say the least. But again, let me know what you guys think about the Fairly Odd Parents. What would you have done for the final season of Fairly Odd Parents to have made it better? What would you have done? Obviously, from my perspective, again, I think this was an executive decision by Nickelodeon. They had enough numbers for the show to continue because they didn't have really that much programming besides SpongeBob and whatever new shows they had. So they were like, oh, let's continue Fairly Odd Parents because it's a long running show. It still gets good rating numbers, and so they extended it for another season. But they wanted these type of characters in there. Obviously, it didn't work. But like I said, if they did want a female character to kind of share the spotlight with Timmy Turner, I feel like it would have made more sense to have introduced or bring back a legacy character like a Veronica, like a Trixie Tang. I think these characters would have been better than Chloe. I think Chloe was a mistake, 100%. Like I said, Chloe wasn't a bad character. It's just the character didn't make sense to be in the show at that point in time, especially when you're basically going to have the character basically be on the same stepping stone as Timmy Turner. If you're going to do that, it needs to be a character that's already exists in the world. That's the only way I think it could have worked. In my personal opinion, I think that's the only way it works. Nickelodeon wanted it to come back. It obviously overstayed its welcome once that season came out the way they wanted it. But nonetheless, Fairly Odd Parents, still a very great show. Obviously, it lasted for a long time for a reason. To be on the network from 1998, if you count the pilots and the Oh Yeah cartoons when it originally aired, when you take those into account, and it basically was on the network, was the second last show from my era as a kid to still be on Nickelodeon airing new episodes. Second only to SpongeBob. That's very, very impressive. SpongeBob right now is the only one that's still left airing stuff from that era now, but Fairly Odd Parents was the second last one. And they were on until 2018, from 1998 to 2018 when you count all the pilots and stuff like that. That's pretty impressive for a show. So let me know what you guys think. Comment, rate. If you like this video, my videos, please subscribe. Hit the notification bell for all the latest contents and subscribe. Also, I know a lot of non-subscribers watch my channel, so make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for all the latest content. That is about it, guys. I am the SS Ultimate Goku. I'm out of it. Peace.